chased by the deep state, fighting for independence, thinking about revolution, looking for alternative solutions. The enemies of the deep state will tell you what others even don't dare to think. Manuel Ochsenreiter and Mateusz Piskorski.
Hello, 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 and welcome to the next edition of the most pro-American podcast on the globe, DieGutenMenschen, Public Enemies of the Deep State. One podcast under God. My name is Manuel Ochsenreiter. I am editor-in-chief of the German news magazine Zuerst. I'm still sitting in my Corona bunker and podcasting until the last drop of blood. And on the other side, as usual, is my friend and colleague Mateusz Piskorski in a bunker in Poland. Hello, Mateusz.
Hello, hello. And first and foremost, we have a special guest today. So perhaps, Manuel, you would present our expert and renowned journalist from United States, but living in Moscow, yes?
Yes, we have today, I think it is the first show with a special guest, and, and I hope it will be a much, much better show than when we played Get Battleship, which was also something new. We didn't proceed. We have a special guest. We announced it in our last podcast. He is an American political analyst living since years in Moscow, but he is much more. He is also working in the sphere of journalism. He is doing a very interesting and successful video blog. You can travel with him on YouTube through the Russian provinces. You can eat with him specialties and drink with him vodka and cognac through the Russian fields. He did even a show about cars and what was also quite interesting. And right now, if you switch in, you can build with him even his house. Please welcome together with me Mr. Tim Kirby from Moscow. Hello, Tim. How are you doing?
Good evening, gentlemen.
Hello.
Guten Morgen, guten Tag, and so on. I can't remember what guten Nacht, is that night or is that not?
Night.
It all gives me a little tear because I'm touched. Thank you, Tim.
Okay. Well, so Nick is not. Okay. I always mix those two up. Yeah, the problem is, Manuel, I this is one of those times where I just want to say in advance to the viewers that I do speak a second language well, because I always feel kind of guilty coming in to a conference where like I'm the only person that speaks English as a native language. So I've punished both of you your entire lives with my stupid language. So just wanted to say I do speak a second language. I can too.
Don't be so hard to yourself, Tim. Don't be too hard to yourself. So please,
I guess maybe that's a little Russian tradition. I'm evolving over time.
I see already. For the listeners, now already is clear. Here are talking three old white heterosexual men, and they have now listened to us for 30 minutes today.
Yes,
Tim.
But it's a torture.
But Tim, tell us how did an American journalist end up in the axis of evil, in the empire of evil, as Ronald Reagan called the Soviet Union, and now.
Well, there's a few things we can get into the topic of who's a journalist and who's not. I kind of put myself in the let's just say the shoes of a political analyst more than a journalist.
Okay.
But the thing is, I wasn't born into this old journalist position. I come from Cleveland, Ohio, in the United States. I come from a pretty poor neighborhood and grew up poor and remained poor and am still kind of poor. And so basically I left the United States when I was about, 22. I was a Peace Corps volunteer, so I was part of the probably an organization that many of your listeners do not approve of, the U.S. State Department. For 2 years I served in Kazakhstan. And then after that I went back to the United States and kind of realized I made a mistake. My life in Kazakhstan was a lot more interesting and full of girls and beer and good times and big ideas. And so I decided to kind of go back to the former Soviet Union. But maybe the genesis of all of this is the fact that all of my ancestors, despite my last name, all my ancestors came from Eastern Europe. And in fact, Mateusz, do you know where Stalovo Wola is?
Yes, of course. So.
Well, in a little village near there that I won't mention because we may have enemies listening, but in a little village near there are my ancestors on my mom's side. I've been there a few times in my life, and to this day, well, unfortunately, my cousins, they all work in London as sort of servants to British people, basically. What in Russian they're called Gastarbeiteri, although that's German.
That's German.
That's German, but Russian too, by the way.
Yeah, so basically they're migrant workers in England, although they're doing okay. I even asked them, how do you feel about being a migrant worker? The one cousin, she was like, I hate this. I want to go back to Poland. I never wanted to leave. And the other one really likes it, so who knows. But they're great. And so, yeah, I've been to Poland many times, and all my ancestors came from somewhere between Stalovo Wola and probably, I don't know, Saratov, Russia or something.
Well, quite interesting places, so I hope to meet you here in Poland as well.
Oh, yeah, I'll be around eventually. I got to see my uncle and aunt. I haven't seen them in 5 years, so...
Guys, but tell me, where's that mystic city where Tim Kirby is coming from? Is this now in Poland? Is it in Belarus? It is in Russia?
Well, where am I right now?
No, it's Poland. It's
Poland. Greater Poland for Mateusz again,
yes,
right?
Yes, yes. Well, not so great. It's the central part of the country. So even for the Germans, it's Poland, Manuel. Yes, it's quite unique.
Then it must be very, very far in the east.
Kinda, yeah. It's it's the part that when they partitioned Poland into 3 chunks, it's the Russian part.
It's close to the Polish-Chinese border, I think, right?
Yes,
yes, somewhere there.
Yes, but I mean, Tim, you have really, and I think you speak fluently Russian, right? Yeah, you will now say, no, not so good.
Very high level. I've worked on the radio for a long time.
Yeah.
And do everything in Russian. And like you mentioned, there's a series on my YouTube channel there called Russia Tips, Tricks, and Travel. And while the quarantine thing is going on, I've been doing a lot of remodeling work. And I think the most successful thing so far, although overall the channel isn't too successful, but the most successful thing is remodeling my house. But of course, I instruct the Russian workmen in Russian. I try to work with them, and it's definitely a linguistic challenge sometimes because I know what every tool is called in English, and I don't know what any of them are called in Russian. So I feel like I've started all over again learning the language with all these tools and techniques and all this stuff. It all has a special name, and it's hard to remember.
But if you compare now, by the way, I'm one of your most faithful watchers, how you built your house. I really have to say that.
Yes.
But if you compare now the media landscape in Russia with the media landscape in the United States, so 2 countries you know not just from newspapers or the internet, but really from living there. What are the main similarities in your opinion, and what are the main differences? Since I think in both spheres, both sides think that what the other side is producing is fake news. So maybe you can tell a little bit about it, because you are one of the very few people who know both sides.
What you're saying about both sides accusing each other of making fake news, very astute. But I will say one thing. One side watches the other's movies, and the other side doesn't. And I think you can take a guess which side that is. Another thing is maybe on more of a subtle thing for a lot of people. In the United States, every time I go back there, and especially I watch local news, I see how they always focus on fear. News is very fear-oriented in America. Everything is some kind of murder, crisis, blood on the streets. Russia still, although the media's changed here since communism ended very drastically, but I would say on sort of a fear-mongering for ratings thing, not so much. Usually in Russia, they'll say, this bad thing's happening, but we'll deal with it. Things are happening to solve it. Russia's very much oriented on sort of a Zen-like calm. Ultimately, Russian generally just don't panic, and I think their lack of desire to panic, or lack of tradition of panicking, doesn't really make it to the media. I'm sure both of you guys have watched South Park, haven't you?
Of course.
Yes, of course.
Okay, that's a real classic TV show already. You know how the people in South Park, when something happens, I don't know, like I'm sure there's going to be an episode on that show if they still make it about COVID-19. Everyone's going to freak out. They're going to commit suicide over being able to get toilet paper and masks. But that panickiness, I try to explain to Russian people, that's not just to be funny. That's actually like a real satire of American society. People really do in America seem to like to panic and flip out over things, whereas in Russia, people don't do that. Like, whereas in America, when the COVID thing, again, I'm kind of making an example of my own example I just used. That's what they call bad writing. But I'm not writing, I'm speaking, so maybe I can get away with it. But essentially, people made this run for toilet paper and this, that, and the other. And in Russia, people sort of saw it coming, and there was like a slight increase in buckwheat sales because no one cares. And that's one of the things that's nice about living here is it's definitely more relaxed. Like Americans see a spark and they claim it's a fire. Russians see a fire and they think about what they should do maybe in the next few hours to start to deal with it. I remember one time I was in Kazakhstan. Perfect example. There was an entire barn it was in a blaze. It's the biggest fire I've ever seen with my own eyes. Where it's like the entire barn was engulfed. Flames going up, and as an American, your natural reaction is, I don't know, what should we do? Should we call the fire department? The people in Kazakhstan, who are mostly ethnic Russians, but then again, the Kazakhs themselves are very influenced by Russian culture, so there's a lot of overlay. But anyways, basically, their answer was just, let it burn. You know what I mean? And basically, that's a real telltale sign of a very Russian versus, or even I'd say Eastern maybe, because I think that probably applies to Koreans and other cultures as well, of sort of, it's already happening. It's probably not going to have a big effect. Just let it burn, Mm-hmm. So see that in a lot of things. You can definitely see it in the media. But the big one is the fear thing. You're not going to get this South Park panic flip out thing in the media. That's a big one. Another big difference that you get in the media is this entire genre of sort of Russian political talk shows that doesn't exist in America. Maybe the closest thing that existed in America was something like that. Politically Incorrect with Bill Maher. They'd sort of have two right-wingish people and two left-wingish people have a chit-chat with Bill Maher, the comedian. Whereas in Russia, they have these shows where you kind of have the hosts and you have a ton of guests. I mean, a sickening amount of guests, where it's like 16 different people, and they're all in sort of a big studio, and they really sort of throw back and forth to get answers to the ideas at the time. And this format really exploded around the time when the Ukrainian crisis happened, because the entire country answers. Like the mood around 9/11 in America was the same mood that was in Russia during maybe the first even few months, if not years, of the Ukrainian crisis. And so that genre is different. You do not see that in America, and especially on the Ukraine, this political talk show genre that's in Russian. I don't know what we could call them, maybe big room shows, because they're always in a really big studio or a big studio talk show with tons of guests, is they do actually try to find guests from the other side, which is insane. In America, you would never have a political roundtable discussion where you have Russian guests on to say their side. Roundtable discussions are how Americans discuss those other dirty people in other countries. That's a real big difference. Mm-hmm. And on the short term, the commercials are a lot shorter in Russia, so that's nice.
But I guess that the political talk shows in Russia are evolving since 2014, let's say, and they are becoming more and more emotional, I would say. If you look, for instance, at one of the best known talk show frontmen of Russia, Vladimir Solovyov, he's more and more emotional. What do you think about it? I mean, the style of the political talk shows in Russia.
Well, the problem is I've worked in a studio next to him for a long time, so I'll keep his name out of my mouth, or else we're going to get into a fight or something. So I'll dodge that one. But the one thing that I can say about emotional is that, remember what I said about just now about how the political talk shows were very relevant during the Ukrainian crisis because the entire country wanted answers. It was the nightmare scenario. It was the planes hitting the buildings on 9/11. What is going on? I need answers. So there was a demand, a natural, real demand for answers. And now that things have kind of stagnated, well, those shows are still there. And, you know, one thing about TV that people don't understand is everyone who works in television on the executive level, the people make the big decisions, are pansies. They're absolute wimps and pansies. They make a lot of money. They understand that if they make one big mistake, they're fired, so they don't do anything as to not make a mistake, okay? So rather than seeing that this wave of the need to have answers is kind of calmed down, maybe these shows should be replaced with something else. Let's try something new. No. Status quo, baby, because I want my 500,000 rubles a month and I don't want to get fired. That's kind of how it is. So these shows have in some ways lasted a little bit beyond their need, and I think they're becoming, maybe if you see them as becoming more emotional, it's because there's nothing happening. Russia's very stagnant right now. The Ukrainian conflict has ground to a halt. It's still there. Syria is kind of still going on, with Russia kind of sort of winning. Really, geopolitically and all that, people aren't looking for answers anymore, and so they have to do these shows. They have to do them 5 times a week, so they have to sort of find something to talk about, much like how I said in America with this local news. I think some of these journalists probably in the local markets in America are like, a girl got raped and shot in the street. Amazing. Now I can have something to write about. Yay. And I think that the Russian equivalent is like President Trump said that Russia is north of China. Well, yes, it is. But he didn't mention that Mongolia is also between us. Like, something, anything to talk about it. You see what I mean? And that's the problem where you don't it's sort of like communism. We don't make things based on demand. We're a supply side economy. We supply media to you whether you want it or not, and we hope you buy it.
Tim, one more question when it comes to Russian media. I mean, some controversies about Nikita Mikhalkov and his latest TV show, which was censored, yes? As far as I know. So how could you comment on that? Because I guess it was quite controversial, yeah?
Well, yeah, there's censorship here and everywhere. I wish you guys would have said we could have talked specifically about this issue, because I could have looked more into it. But it was kind of like he was starting to step on a few toes, like basically the guy who runs Sberbank, the biggest bank in Russia, and by far the biggest bank. When I mean biggest, I mean like the share between Windows operating system and Mac OS. Like, it's that big. They're a titan, okay? So, yeah, he sort of seemed to have gotten in trouble, and they didn't want to put that material, and that Graf guy, he's had that very like, if either of you guys are fans of Alex Jones, Graf, the guy who runs Sberbank, he is the elitist. He is the evil demon at the top that hates humanity, and your hatred will be punished. So that's like Alex Jones. He is the enemy of Alex Jones, because he's said publicly all sorts of things about wanting to keep the population dumb, and there's no reason in educating people, because, basically he's very much like the sort of Aldous Huxley Brave New World sort of view of things. Like, if you're born to be an A, you deserve it. If you're meant to be a D, you should be happy being a D person. So he's kind of come out and said things like that. And also, obviously, the biggest bank in the country has certain weird policies that people don't like, and so on. So there's a question of that, but then also there's a sort of counter argument where Mikhalkov he has sort of in his old age, like when he started off being younger, he was a more normal director, like normal Soviet director. Then he seems to have kind of become liberal, and now I think as he's getting towards the end, maybe he's afraid of God or afraid of something, and he's kind of tried to go back to being sort of this right-wing guy. But I don't think he really understands what it means to be that position, if you can understand what I mean by that. It's sort of like imagine your most super like liberal kind of wimpy hippie friend who's really, all they really like to do is just kind of drink coffee and read, and then all of a sudden they try to position themselves as this, like, manly, pro-heartland, pro-us kind of guy.
Yes.
And it just comes across as a farce to me. And first off, the guy sits there in an ascot, because you guys aren't native speakers. An ascot is like this fancy scarf that men wear. So he's trying to be like this man of the people, but he has this like $5,000 scarf on just to offend me. And I just, it doesn't come across very well. It does for a lot of people, though. Some people really do believe it. But, you know, he has come up with these weird ideas. Like he was like, we have to counter McDonald's. We need the government to step in and help us make a fast food restaurant that's Russian. First off, there is a fast food restaurant chain that's Russian. It's everywhere in the country, first off. Secondly, why would the government step in? You see, so what I'm saying is he's very much in the elite, and his attempt to sort of be this man of the people come from this perspective of being in the liberal elite, to the degree that he doesn't know that there's already a Russian fast food chain. In fact, there's a few. And the fact that he doesn't understand that it's not the government's job to provide fast food in a capitalist economy. You see what I mean? So that him, I don't mean to say that he's an awful person or something, but he is not someone I like. And I'll tell you another reason, because there's this sort of old guard. There's a fund, you know, like the Russian, the guys who determine where the government sends their movie money, and that's what you would call an old boys network. They don't let anyone new in. They all give money to their buddies, and all Russian movies are garbage. You see what I mean? And he's also sort of part of the old boys network because he gets to make movies, and the movies he makes suck. He has some classic movies that Russians love, but after communism ended, his career died. So that's another thing where, as someone who dreams of being able to actually make a movie in Russia, watching someone squander chance after chance after chance and then preach to me like he's some sort of Bruce Springsteen pretending to be from the Midwest, you know. Bruce Springsteen is was very criticized in America because he's a like rich guy from New Jersey, and he would sing about the heartland of America. Yeah, that's where I'm from. Don't tell me, don't sing about my heartland, okay, Bruce? All right, go bathe in your money.
Well, now Mikhalkov has moved to YouTube, yes, I guess. So he went underground, let's say. But anyway,
okay. Well, Mateusz, you sound like you disagree with me. Do you disagree with my thoughts on Mikhalkov?
No.
Man.
I don't want to discuss Mikhalkov himself, yes, because of course there are different camps. I mean, it would be a long discussion about different camps within Russian elites, yes.
Yeah.
You just touched it a little bit, but anyway, when it comes to the alternatives, yes, Mikhalkov went to YouTube, I guess, now, and he has several millions, I believe 7 million, yes. Well,
good for him. Hey, if he wants to make this transformation into being this man of the people, and he actually does it, that's fine. But so far, I'm just not seeing any results from it. That's all.
I'm going to ask you another question. If you think that Mikhalkov will be banned from YouTube, as several Russian channels lately, I mean, last 2 or 3 weeks, there were, yes.
Oh, well,
that's
trust me.
When
here, let me tell you a little story. I'm the same guy. Hopefully I've gotten smarter over the years. But how I got into the Russian media was from an extremely successful YouTube channel, okay, where you're talking about millions of views. A couple of years ago, where I'm at now, they shifted me off of doing serious material in the past for RT. They shifted me over to doing more sort of human interest, lifestyle stuff. Fine, whatever. We got a channel going. We went from 800 people. By the time I got shifted off to a new project, I think we were at 45,000, and that was in a year. So 800 to 45,000 people in a year is really good. Had a YouTube channel that had millions of views.
That's as successful as Corona.
Now it is really,
yes.
But now it is really hard to get anything in Russia to get the hits and views. Really, the YouTube algorithm is very much against Russia. And you can even see it because even we have some really good, documentary pieces. We have really good search engine optimization. We have people who deal with the SMM and all that. Obviously, we don't pay for advertising. That's strictly forbidden. But your SMM tactics and search engine optimization, of course, don't cost money. Still, it's real difficult now. So it's not even just maybe that certain channels are being banned. In general, I think Russia as a concept is really being shoved down, and YouTube is much harder for everyone, regardless of whether they want to talk about Russia or not. is a much harder platform to enter into. And I was even talking today in an interview saying that if Russia really is so angry about getting stamped out of YouTube, well, we got to make an alternative, don't we?
Tim,
the same goes, Manuel, just one more question. Well, the same goes for Facebook as well, yes? I mean, several of my Russian friends have just posted some photos from 1945, from Berlin, by the way, Manuel.
I don't know what happened there.
With the Soviet flag, of course. Yes. And, of course, they were banned from by Facebook as well. But what I would like to ask you is, are there any, according to you, alternatives when it comes to social media? Because a lot of Russians are speaking lately about Telegram as an alternative for Facebook and several other social media. What do you think?
Ironically, though, Telegram is kind of partially banned in Russia. So it works very slowly, but it does work, although they've kind of gotten around it. Basically, the fact that it's kind of banned and yet still functions makes me think as though maybe certain people don't really want to ban it, because in Russia you're supposed to release user data to the government. That's why LinkedIn doesn't work in Russia, and you have to use a VPN to access it. And certain companies comply, like Facebook is apparently very open with the Russian government about what's going on. However, LinkedIn and Telegram are not. But LinkedIn doesn't work at all, whereas Telegram just kind of started to work more slowly. In fact, because their symbol is a paper airplane, the guy who made Telegram, when this first got banned, because one of his big things was he wanted to make this like total privacy, total this, that, and the other. Well, guess what? Governments don't like total privacy. And he had this like thing where everyone in Moscow would throw paper airplanes out of their windows. It didn't really work out very well, but that was his sort of protest march for that. But people use Telegram. It works really well, despite the fact that it works slower than it used to. It's a good service. And the thing that actually kind of sucks about it is I was part of a startup tech company for a while in Thailand, and we were basically trying to make basically the assignment we were given, the result of it was something like Telegram. And I could have been like the guy who made Telegram, because it's awesome. But I didn't have the creativity. I guess I didn't have the foresight, and we effed up. And I don't work in Thailand anymore, as you can see. But then also VK is pretty big. Like Russia's equivalent to Facebook is very big. It's multilingual. It's growing. I'm starting to see more and more foreign people on it. That's pretty good. But overall, I think one of the key problems is Russia has a very tough time as a country overall with promoting anything. Russia's not good at promoting itself. And although pretty much Russia, like China, sort of has their own version of everything, Russia does too, but Russia's just not very good at getting it out there and getting people on. Because if I was the guy who owned VK, the Russian Facebook, I would be hiring people to go to every libertarian group on Facebook and be like, guys, you can be as libertarian as you want on VK. You love the American Constitution, knock yourself out. You guys want to talk about hate and pedophiles? Go ahead, hate as many pedophiles as you want. Because on VK, really, I think the only like real thing that'll get you banned is separatism in terms of Russia, like trying to say Chechnya needs to be independent. That's forbidden. And pretty much everything else is fair game, and like hardcore pornography isn't. But so in a lot of ways, ironically, I would say that VK, if you're talking about like this place where you don't like your standard social network that you have in your mind, generic social network between America's, China's, other countries, really, I think VK actually probably offers by far the most amount of freedom, intellectual. But they don't understand that, and they don't understand the value of that because they're Russians.
Yes. I have a question.
On a gold mine. Yeah.
Yes, Tim.
Because sorry, Manuel, I didn't mean to cut you off, but in America, they've tried to also, I think, make alternatives to Facebook. The problem is it's hard to make an alternative to a giant, because you need millions of people to have that critical mass to build a social network on, especially for advertisers. And once you break that critical mass, you're set. Well, the thing is, starting a new social network that's like super private in America is difficult. You need millions, maybe seriously billions of dollars in advertising. Well, the Russian network is already in every language you could imagine. It already has, I think, over a few 100 million users. So they have the critical mass. They could do that. Okay, that's the difference. Excuse me, Manuel. Sorry to be rude there.
It's no problem. I'm used to that.
Oh well.
Since so long with Mateusz that I cry silently inside, you know. No, I wanted to just to jump back when you told about your experience with Russian media and YouTube. I'm interested. What audience did you address? Did you address from Russia a Western audience or the Russian audience, or maybe both? That would be very interesting. So, because I know you were also harshly criticized from some Western so-called critics and analysts. You are a mouthpiece for Russia. You are doing state propaganda and so on and so on. So maybe you can just tell a few sentences. I would be interested what about the audience and also about the reactions of the audience. I think you are a guy who got a lot of hate mails.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely for certain. Especially when I one time after I did a radio talk show where I kind of took the position against. There's this one really famous con artist here. Like he was a big time. He was almost basically a cult leader, but he was running a pyramid scheme. And I stood up to him. Oh, that was 6 months of hell, guys. That was 6 months of calls and emails and death threats. That was rough. But that was after the YouTube channel.
Okay.
Manuel wanted me to talk about the original YouTube channel. Well, it was called Tim Kirby 3679, and over the last couple of years, YouTube evenly every couple of weeks takes exactly 100 subscribers away from me. Thank you, YouTube. So I'd call them Nazis, but his feelings might get hurt. Who knows? But so they basically my channel is called Tim Kirby 3679, and that was in the early days of YouTube, where right now in YouTube things have become a science. They've become rigid, formulaic. You have to do this, this, and this in order to succeed. But back then it was open, so I'd try all sorts of stuff. So I did something called the Tsar podcast, TSAR, where it was basically like a travel thing, kind of like what I do now, but with my one buddy who's also a radio talk show host. And then I also did like sort of what they would call today explainer videos, because this was back, when I'm single. This is 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009. I think YouTube was 2007 started, so maybe it was 2006, but whatever. The dawn of YouTube. And I was a single guy. So what happens when you're a single guy in Moscow? You're going on a billion first dates trying to find Miss Right. And, you talk to these girls, and every one of them says exactly the same thing to you. Exactly the same viewpoints, exactly the same beliefs. And so eventually you want to just go in and you have to go like, guys or gals, because it's women, not everyone in America is rich. Not everyone is made happy by exactly the
But you even look like Richard Gere. You even look like Richard Gere in Pretty Woman.
But who I actually look like is the lead guitarist for the Smashing Pumpkins, Billy Corgan. We have exactly the same face. But thankfully my hair is still hanging on my head for now. Maybe in a couple years we'll both be completely bald. But so it was basically a little bit of my anger from all of these millions of first dates. And also maybe Manuel can add to this, but in Russia, when you're a Western foreigner, when you're any foreigner, you probably get the same kind of conversations every time you meet someone, the same stereotypes. And so it drives you nuts after a while, especially working at that company that made video games. I had to meet people all the time and talk to people all the time. And so every day you're meeting people, new girls you're trying to date, and it's the same effing 3, 4, 5, 6 over and over and over again. And just out of my rage, that's why I started to make videos on YouTube, just to really sort of show the middle finger to society, more Russian society, to be honest. Like, guys, wake up. Wake up. So that's really where the genesis came from, at my internal anger.
We when I was in Russia, I only spoke about the categorical imperative of Immanuel Kant. I don't know what happened wrong to you.
About the
imperative of Immanuel Kant, yes, and we were discussing.
Oh, Kant.
Yes,
I see. Yeah. You don't want to talk ill of Kant here.
That was a long, embarrassing pause after I finished my joke. Oh God.
no, but definitely. I don't want to make it sound. No, I would say that there definitely is a more intellectual side to Russians. I would say that the average Russian. One thing that I say why I live in Russia if you talk to a homeless person on a bench in Russia, they have more to say than the average American, like in a suit. Okay, that's one of the hard parts about living in America is if you don't like talking about the weather and American football, there is no conversation. So I may complain that I was stuck in these circular conversations, but compared to like the American Midwest, everyone here is some sort of enlightened philosopher. Okay. But I did get a lot of the same stereotypes, and so I just sort of had to put this channel together to break it because it's insane, especially too like one of the videos I made that was really successful. Well, some of them were about English because this invasion of the English language into places like Poland and Germany and Russia, and the absurdity and how people try to use English to sound cool and they're so hip and they're speaking English that gets really, really old so fast, especially when they do it wrong. I can't really explain this in a funny way. I wish I was. But like the term downshifting has come into Russian and they never use it right. And every time I hear it, just my spine just cringes because the people who say it think they're so cool because they said downshifting. Or when you go to past like some kind of store and you'll see великолепный shopping. Amazing shopping, but shopping being the English word, and it's just like I didn't immigrate for this. I didn't come here for this. It's so submissive. It's so trendy. Now I'm starting to sound like Alex Jones. So submissive, so trendy. But it is, and it's infuriating. And so some of the videos I made about that topic of the invasion of basically like how Russians speak English like garbage and they should just not, and all that. And one of them was also about how in a lot of ways it's a little bit of an overlay between cowboys and gopnik culture. And everyone was like, no, you're wrong. And now thankfully there's a YouTube channel called Life of Boris. And that guy was able to do what I wasn't because he's a Russian guy from Estonia. And then I argued that gopnik culture, like Russian thug culture, street culture, is as cool as cowboys or any other like mafia street culture anywhere. But Russians were like, no, it's not. They're different. And now that Life of Boris guy has like so many. I think he has 500,000 subscribers, millions of views, sort of promoting that side of Russia. This like trashy. What Russians would call klyukva, I don't know, kitsch maybe in English, kind of Russia. And so he proved me right. I wasn't able to do it, but Boris was. But that's because he is Russian, so it's a little bit different. But there's a lot of very cool – but basically Russians are unable to because, again, going back to – I probably sound like an angry person today because it's all criticism.
Yes, what happened to you today?
Yes. I'm actually really happy to be here with you guys. I wanted to get on your program for a long time. But
the name is DieGutenMenschen. It means the good people. We are friendly and nice, Tim. Don't forget that.
Yes,
I'll be good after this because, again, one problem that Russia has, the Russians, is Russians don't really see potential in things. Okay, so American, I've said this a million times. I'll tell you guys. It's the same old stories I've been telling for a long time. But recently, why I've gotten more angry is I'm trying a new approach. Because for like the last 10 years, I've tried to be more American. Let's put energy into when we're talking because we're American. And no one takes you seriously here. So now I'm just angry because Russians understand anger. But one thing that happens, right, an American, he sees a valley, okay? So an American sees a valley and he thinks, gosh, I could put a hotel here. You know, I could maybe start like maybe a little store and get people to come here and do like fishing. Man, what could I do? You know, I bet I could put a house. You know, he already thinks about how to develop it, what could be done with the lake, how it could change, right?
A Russian goes to a valley. Pioneer. Yes.
Yeah, something like that. Pioneer, but a pioneer who's sort of more creative about what it could be. What could be. You know, it's like that movie Field of Dreams. If you build, they will come, about that guy building a baseball field in a cornfield. I never saw the movie, but the words, if you build it, they will come, that is super American. Russia's answer to that is it is not built, no one come, because Russians don't see that. And that's one thing why it's very, very, very hard to do business or work in the media here, because like, you know, the U.S. State Department is throwing 5-10-year big grants at people with low expectations that anything will map. And in Russia, you better yield amazing, phenomenal results on no money in 6 months. So that's one other problem that really holds Russia back, is just this idea. And also, Russians are very convinced that everything that's good or big or developed about America just happened instantly. Like, it didn't evolve. Like, Hollywood was basically planned by a government bureaucrat and built in a year. And that's not how it happened, you know? And so that's another thing where, as someone who works between both of these worlds, I have to sometimes really try to wake up Russian people, because they don't see it. You know, they don't see it. They don't see any potential in their country, in themselves, in anything other than going to the West to work for more money, cleaning toilets.
That's the problem of all Eastern European countries, by the way.
Yeah, Berlin is the magic city which turns a Slovakian professor into a bartender. So that is exactly it's exactly wow. And also I think London the same especially for Polish people, which turns Polish intellectual in someone who is bringing beer. Yeah, that is. But I am so.
You know, thanks to Corona crisis, they are coming back.
Well, both of you guys. Mateusz, I don't know. I know Manuel has visited at times Moscow. Mateusz, have you visited Russia ever?
Yes, several times.
More often than I ever did.
A lot of time.
Yeah, more often.
Well, I'm sure at some point, haven't you gotten in a conversation where Russian people are like, "Oh, but there's so much money there. Why'd you come here? There's nothing good here. There's so much money over there." And when you try to tell these people, like, I don't know, maybe not everything in life is money, they just explode into rage. How dare you say that? In your country, salaries are higher, therefore it's better. And there's nothing you can do to break it. It's just very...
Yes, particularly in the Russian province. Yes, I mean not in Moscow or St. Petersburg, but of course in other small Russian towns. Yes, that's true. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Guys, I'm so sorry to say so. We are slowly getting towards the end with our Cowboy and Gopnik podcast. I will memorize that, Tim.
Well, now that I'm an American in Russia, I am both a cowboy and a Gopnik at the same time. I'm evolved.
Be sure you will read this in the description for the video. Be sure of that. But a very, very last question, and I ask you also for if possible, a quick answer. So, as someone, I mean, you have also the special perspective. You're someone who lives outside the West, but on the other side, I am pretty much sure you are consuming Western media, and not just the Western mainstream and corporate media, but also the Western alternative media. I would be interested, and I think Mateusz as well, in your opinion, what should be improved in the alternative media in the West, that the alternative media eventually can really compete with the huge media houses? Or are we already competing with the huge media houses, with state and corporate media? But what are your advices as someone who is watching it from outside?
This may sound insane, but hear me out. A lot of things, even the alternative media does an amazing job. And there are a lot of people out there who've dedicated their lives. I think both of you have. I have to a degree, but sometimes I've spent more time trying to save my own butt than save the world intellectually. But I think people do a lot. But it's always going to be hard to fight against the big money. And I think that maybe the one thing that's lacking, or something I know has to be done, but I don't quite know how to do it, is to really get some of those bigger people with bigger money to start giving money to the alternative media. Because essentially in an information war, cash, that's the bullets, that's the tanks, that's the gasoline, that's the fuel of the information war. And I think that as long as the alternative media is really just relying on desperate donations from people themselves who are desperate, it's always going to be very difficult. However, the alternative media has achieved incredible things so far. The mainstream narrative has been really broken up, but overall, in society, these mainstream narratives, I think, still dominate, and mainstream views still dominate, and it's just hard without fun. someone, especially now with the way we talked about YouTube, right, is now becoming absolutely brutal. It's very hard to get a project going. Well, the thing is with the quality standards of YouTube now, there's for people to just sort of open their phone and start being interesting and get that audience and get that information out there. Those doors are being closed. And now they have to have perfect lighting, green screens, professional camera, high-end computers. That way they can edit this in. They need to be able to have some stock footage. And in a lot of ways, YouTube is becoming like the dinosaur media in the fact that it's demanding more and more resources out of people in order to reach an audience, whereas in the past it was the cause of those prices dropping. Okay, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so our real fight now as people who are in the alternative media is, again, if there was a way to create a competitor to YouTube so that way the prices could go back down, a fair competitive field, a fair field where videos and information are shared fairly without algorithms crushing things that aren't good for advertising, and for us to somehow maybe go to some of these rich guys and try to ask them for money, because I did work for a while on a Russian Christian television channel that unfortunately it failed. There were reasons it failed. We could get into that maybe another day. That's a shame. But the thing is, why was there a Russian Christian TV channel that had me on? Because there was a rich guy with a dream. And I am a poor guy with dreams. If I had the money, I'd go for round 2.
You were the embodiment of the dreams of the rich guy.
Well, I'm the dream because I created from scratch. I pitched it, developed it, and was one of the hosts on the #1 show on a Russian language Christian TV channel. I was #1, baby, and I have a lot of guys, Mateusz and Manuel. I have a lot of failures in my life, but at least on a TV channel, I was #1 for a while, till it ended. There you go.
Let's hope we'll be able to create something like not only the internet channels, but perhaps more serious in the future, and to find new platforms as well. Yes.
We will, because first off, both of you guys are more competent than I am, so that's awesome. Secondly, we know a lot of people, but guys, I'm totally open to that. But the thing is, what I've been telling people, because I get a ton of offers all the time, I'm not trying to float my own boat or try to make myself seem important, but it's true. I do get a lot of offers. The problem is everyone wants to do something on enthusiasm, and that always fails. It always falls apart. It's really about the money. It's really about finding the source of money. Is there a George Soros who likes humanity? You know, maybe that guy who financed that Christian channel that I was on, he seems to like people. Are there some people who are maybe wealthy that could support a smaller media network, but they're sort of terrified of coming out of the woodwork, or they're afraid because their entire lives are spent at these elite events where they want to seem like they agree with everyone? I think it might be because even one thing that was crazy, even Prince Charles, like about a year ago, came out and made like a YouTube video where we have to defend and protect Christianity because now Christians are being repressed. So who knows? Maybe there's a certain change of heart with these elite, but we really need our George Soros. Again, that's who we need. We need that kind of guy, but who likes humanity.
That's a perfect conclusion. I mean, we need an alternative George Soros.
Yeah,
so if any of the alternative George Soroses listens to us, let us know.
Yes. Do you have $10 billion, but also consider human beings better than dogs? If so, contact Tim Kirby at.
Yes, and he will ask you, Tim, do you have change?
Change. Yeah, can I have some spare change? But I know that sounds, like I said, I knew that would sound kind of insane, but in a lot of ways it's real because, guys, do you agree with me? Is money the fuel of information warfare? Can you fight information war on nothing? I don't think you can.
I wouldn't see it since you opened now the topic. I wouldn't see it that extreme as you were saying right now, because we have examples, especially when it comes right now to all these crises of the last 10 years. We have examples of so-called influencers and video podcasters of guys who were somehow exactly doing this, recording some videos with their mobile phones with this so-called citizen journalism. I don't know how one one should describe it. But first of all, we had that phenomenon which took place without any money for these people. Some of them went rich because they were able to monetize their YouTube success. We have on the other side the example of alternative media in Europe, not just now video and internet media, but really also, let us call it classical media, like in print, what I'm doing myself, by the way, that we have there a development of a dramatic increasement. My English now is not very good, but that the quality of this media increased. You cannot see anymore in the shelf in the bookstore behind which magazine are 1,000 employees and behind which magazine are 10 employees. So also this, we have the phenomenon that computer programs for producing, if it is now layout, if it is video producing, that the video software became available for almost everyone. It still costs money, that's right, but there is a difference if you had to go in a studio maybe 20 years ago, or if you can really do this today on your laptop. And I think the costs already decreased, but of course you're right. And I mean, the example you mentioned with YouTube, with the algorithms of YouTube is right, because we speak at the end about a competition platform for YouTube itself, if I understood you right. And I think that cannot be done in a garage with some enthusiastic guys. There you're absolutely right, and there I absolutely agree. But when it comes to the individuals working in non-mainstream media and in alternative media in the West, and this I have to say to rescue my own dignity and honor right now, then we have to speak about really that the quality increased a lot from very badly copied papers in the 1980s and early 90s. Mateusz knows exactly what I'm speaking about, to very professional produced media in our times. So there you can already directly compete, but I totally
one thing,
agree.
Manuel, is remember with the materials, the quality is better, and I the alternative media because first off I'm in it and I'm a part of it. Secondly, I think that all the people who have achieved a lot, basically, I'm saying there's a huge step forward, but there's still a long way to go. And one of those long ways to go is I recently wrote an article for the Strategic Culture Foundation. I would say that's probably the thing I most closely associate myself with, because we've talked about YouTube and doing, some fun travel stuff. But at heart, I really like the intellectual stuff the best, but only the Strategic Culture Foundation lets me do it. And I wrote an article, and one quote from that was basically, Russia will never be an empire until it can make a movie, okay? That someone will watch. And that's one thing, is that I am a big believer that the subconscious mind is the real battlefield of the information war. It's very much feelings, intuition, and I don't think that we're really ever going to be able to win this war completely until there's more attacks on this sort of subconscious front. And by subconscious front, I think that really is affected mostly by your movies and video games. That's really how people get a generic worldview from in their subconscious. Like, I mean, if you look at Star Wars, what little boy, there are probably not many men especially alive now who haven't seen Star Wars. And Star Wars is the most obvious, like a pro-American foreign policy propaganda you've ever seen, but it sits in people's subconscious. And I mean, because it's just, we're the guys in the white uniforms, or no, we're the guys in the good guy uniforms. We're allowed to kill the bad guys because they kind of look evil. Well, have they done anything evil? Well, I guess they may have blown up a planet. Okay, kind of, but they didn't really show that. But then we can just kill as many of them as we want. And then, remember in Star Wars at the end when the rebels destroy the Death Star, it's joyous. They've killed millions of people. There's never that moment where they're like, oh man.
Thank you, Tim.
Well,
thank you.
Blowing up planets. No, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. No, because this is my idea that the rebellion is the bad side of Star Wars, and this is what we. By the way, what we say in Germany. How do you recognize a cool guy? The cool guy liked as a child by intuition the Empire. The cool guys were already as a child on the side of the empire. So the first
because the empire looks evil, but the rebels who imagine in a galactic empire. So a civil war starts. Imagine the amount of death that would happen, elsewhere when all the supply chains are broken up and all that. The anarchy caused by that. The rebels are happy. Yeah, it's exactly the same attitude. How people in Washington celebrate when a color revolution or like the war in Iraq or whatever casts society into this horrific anarchy where millions of people are dying. But now they'll finally have the opportunity to be democratic. Yay! Now, I'm glad we could talk about the madness, the propaganda that is Star Wars, but it's the fact that we've all seen it. It is all in our subconscious. That Luke Skywalker, cowboy kind of guy, he's the good guy, and people who wear scary uniforms and act serious are bad. Those subconscious messages, I think, are vastly, a million times more powerful than any magazine. No offense, Manuel, but you know what I mean. That's what really shapes our view of the of our lives, of what's around us. It is the subconscious battlefield, and that's what I've been telling people in Russia for probably the last 10 years. We've got to make a movie that's fun and entertaining, but that also shows this other way because of thinking of things. Because in a lot of ways, this American package of ideas was all sort of made by Hollywood, but it was never made as like some kind of marketing piece. Like, in America, we have freedom, you do not. But that feeling goes over, and it works. It's feelings, it's emotions. It's all the girly stuff. And that's really what we need to do, and especially in Russia, we've got to make a movie that actually people want to watch. Maybe the Japanese, to a degree, with their cartoons have done that because Japanese media has succeeded in America, and I think that's something which, again, sounds mental. So in context, really the only people who've succeeded in producing foreign media that Americans watch are the Japanese. And we should also think about, why? And why does that work in the West, but it doesn't? I think maybe it's because Japanese loser nerds have something in common with our loser nerds. I don't know. But they've been able to do it. But really, otherwise, the West is completely impenetrable from other ideas or ways of doing things. And I think a movie can really, really portray that. The problem is try getting the money to do it.
These are very positive finishing words for our podcast, and we have to end slowly. Sorry, Tim. We could listen to you many, many hours more, and I think the audience too, but we have slowly to come to an end of our, I say it again, Gopnik and Cowboy podcast.
Anytime, my
the first time in the podcast universe that we commemorate the innocent victims of the Death Star. By the way, I want to recall it. I think
and of the rebellion, the people who starved to death because of the stupid rebels, them too.
Thank you for that is a very positive, and I thank you so much, Tim, for your time, for your ideas, for your participation in our podcast. Hopefully not the very last time. I hope you will join in again if the critics will not finish you now.
All right. Well, next time, let's come back. Let's just do all Star Wars, an hour of Star Wars. We'll break it down. Absolutely.
Perfect idea. Let's continue, Tim. I guess it will be even more interesting next time.
So I thank Mateusz, I thank Tim for being with us for this very long but also very interesting podcast. The first time with a celebrity guest, with Timothy Kirby.
This program was presented to you by Manuel Ochsenreiter and Mateusz Piskorski, the hottest dissident who won't violate any time the global rules against racism, extremism, or any other bad isms.